Garden Report is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Hey, Barry Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report. Back on the floor at TD Garden for the first time since the finals, but it's preseason.
It feels good.
Yeah, it feels like preseason now. Celtics win by 50 here against the Sixers team that played nobody, essentially, bench cast. But that allowed, once again, Luke Kornet in a spot start to go off in the opening minutes. 11 points in the short stint to start the game, 5-6 minutes. At one point, it felt like he was scoring on every possession, and it just gave a crescendo to our conversation about whether he should start or not, along with the fact that Al Horford sat out again in this one. So they're clearly trying to see Kornet with these starters, whether it's for the purpose of him playing in the back-to-backs in a starting role where Horford's going to sit out, or for something bigger where he might actually become the starter for this team early in the season. We've talked about it a couple of times at this point, but tonight showed once again that Kornet's capable of stepping into that position, whether it's for a shorter amount of time or a spot time or something longer here. And they just keep giving him reps, and he just keeps responding to them.
Yeah, I mean, he looked really good today. And I will say, I would be very surprised still if they completely relegate Al to the bench during the time that Porzingis is out in favor of Luke Kornet. And I think it's just a matchup thing. Like, there's going to be games where you're going to want Al on the floor if Joel Embiid is on the floor, Giannis is on the floor. I think there's still a physicality and an advantage that he has over them, over Luke. That being said, I think in a lot of matchups, like, you don't actually lose as much. And I think obviously today they were playing a pretty anemic front court, and he said it post game. He said, we had a lot of advantages on the floor. It made it a little bit easier for me. But it's just good to remember that, like, you don't have Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and then like a bunch of nobodies that can't play. Like, you actually have a guy who can really fit into that role and play quite well. And I think Joe Mazzulla said he's one of the best defenders on the team today, and that's for a good reason. He's not just saying that just to have a good quote. I think he really means it, because Luke has just shown that he knows where to go on both ends.
Here's Joe Mazzulla talking about Luke's performance, rebounding, defense, scoring in this game too. He was everywhere.
He's worked really hard this summer, and I've definitely seen him get better. Just his screen reads, his spacing recognition. He's one of our best defenders because of his ability to communicate on the fly the different stuff that we do on every single possession, and he does a great job of reading each possession, and I think he's gotten really better offensively up until this point, just with his screening angles and his spacing recognition mostly. And, he continues to get better and better.
So confidence, obviously trust. This is Luke's 5th year here. That's still the biggest advantage he has, is he knows the system. He's added to it by being more aggressive as a scorer. Offensive rebounding, a big improvement last year for him too. So all those things, I think, allow him to step effectively into that spot. They went 4-0 when Al and Porzingis were out last year, and it might be a similar number of games if he's not in the starting lineup. But I'm coming around on it because, one, naturally scales back Al's minutes.
I'm laughing at you saying you're coming around on it. You've been on board. You've been on board.
I've been willing to listen. And again, I'll credit John Corrales for asking the question originally. 2, it allows him to play with Tillman, which was a really good lineup for this team last year. They can both come off the bench into that second unit. Tillman hit 3 for 3 from 3 today, and it's 5 for 7 or 6 for 8 in the preseason. So his three-pointer allows him to play the 4 a little more effectively. And you're just keeping Al in that position that he's going to be eventually anyway. When Porzingis comes back, he's the starter. Horford comes off the bench. So if you start Luke, you can keep Al off the bench all year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I guess if that's what you want, then you definitely have a pathway to do that. Like, this is a very serviceable starting lineup. I just don't know that we know that they don't want Al Horford to start at all. I mean, last year, a year ago today, they were having conversations around like who goes to the bench, because all 6 guys wanted to start and they wanted all 6 guys out there. So to me, it's like, this is, he hasn't aged 10 years in the last year. Obviously they're going to take it even easier on him, and everything they did last year panned out. Like, he was great in the playoffs. He did what they needed from him. But I was just watching the beginning of the Starting 5 documentary, and LeBron being so mad about, his minutes restriction. It just made me wonder. I wonder where Al is even at mentally when it comes to this. Like, does Al want to play in the preseason? Does he want to play very limited minutes in the playoffs? Like, there's a lot we don't know, and that would come into this conversation as well, of like, what does Al want? And maybe he has a sore knee right now, and that's why he's not playing. And when his knee heals, then he'll be back. We don't really know that either.
I think there's something there, sore knee, or them knowing they
sore
have
toe.
to start him. That's a big
That
one.
was the famous
That's
one
a big
last
one
year.
from last year. Is the sore toe still there? Maybe, but I think it's more so. He played so many minutes last year. The summer was so short. He mentioned this at media day. They need to start him ultra slow here.
Yeah.
And that's the story, I think, of him sitting out 3 games. Do we see him in the preseason at all? Tomorrow's an opportunity, but I thought today would be the day he would get out there, given that everybody played among the starters going against Philadelphia, and he wasn't. So
Right.
we'll see what that becomes tomorrow. Maybe he'll just play that one preseason game Azula said he was going to tomorrow, and he'll start opening night against Cat, and this will all be for nothing here. But I like the idea. It's creative. It's working so far, which is the big thing. And Al just needs to play as few minutes as he can this year, and whatever allows them to do that is what they ultimately have to do here, and I think they will do.
Yeah, and honestly, at the end of the day, it's going to be both. It's not one versus the other.
Could they
like,
go back and forth?
maybe. I mean, maybe they just pick one to go, but I think they're both going to play significant minutes early on. Like the first half of the season, Luke Cornett's going to be a critical player to this team. Al Horford's going to be critical. And it's a luxury that they have both, honestly, in the wake of their best post player being out, right? And then we saw a lot of good things out of Xavier Tillman tonight, too. So you got to feel pretty good about their front court depth. I think that's a point of concern for people. If you're going to pick a weakness that this team has, it's the front court and potentially like the injury concerns or things like that. But there's a lot of promising stuff going on too. Xavier Tillman's shot and all that. I think Nimi is still the biggest question mark of those guys. Like still not quite sure what he gives you on a nightly basis, and I'm sure we'll see more of him through the rest of preseason.
Yeah, not a question so far. Cornette's strong this preseason. Tillman, major plus with the shooting. I wrote about that at Boston Sports Journal with one of his old coaches who showed a ton of confidence in him as a three-point shooter, and it's showing right now. And I also talked to Luke pregame on clnsmedia.com, so check that out. Noah Delzell. All her WNBA work is over at SBNation.com, and you can check out the You Got Boston podcast here on CLNS Media. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. Go over there. I'll be picking more on Luke Cornette's rebounds this year. I think that'll be underrated, the way he's grabbing boards. But that's yet to come. Football, still the focus over there. Use code CLNS to get $50 when you play $5 if your fantasy team's all injured. Go with daily fantasy over at Prize Picks and use that code CLNS. And Game Time, you want to get in here for Celtics Raptors tomorrow? Great prices over at Game Time and $20 off your first purchase when you use the code CLNS. Use that code now. First time ticket buyers over there get $20 off your order. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Game time. For Noah Dalzell, I'm Bobby Manning. This has been the Garden Report. Celtics win again in the preseason. Move to 3-0 by 50 over the Sixers here. Celtics Raptors tomorrow. 7 o'clock, we'll be back with post-game and coverage throughout. Hey, Bobby Manning here. If you made it this far, you probably enjoyed this video, so subscribe, turn on notifications, and check out our social media platforms at Celtics CLNS